Over the past few decades, America has created millions of millionaires. But the strange part is, most of them don't describe themselves as rich. Rather, we seem to have created an entirely new financial class, what we would describe as middle-class wealthy. Those households that often have, say, $1 to maybe $3 million as a net worth. Their lives don't look the way we traditionally imagine it. They drive normal cars, live in normal neighborhoods, they worry about healthcare costs, they worry about retirement income, and yes, they consider themselves middle class. And yet, many of these households are already in the uppermost tier of wealth in this country. For instance, median U.S. household net worth is roughly $192,000. A net worth of about $1.9 million places a household in the top 10%, and around $3.8 million places a household in the top 5%. So a household with roughly a $2 million net worth is already ahead of about 90% of American households. Yet those in this group often don't describe themselves as rich or wealthy, and that's often because what we look at as wealthy, or what we accept to be wealthy, has changed over time. Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin, and welcome back to the channel. For decades, becoming a millionaire symbolized extraordinary wealth, but of course, inflation has drastically changed that benchmark. $1 million in 1985 would be the equivalent of more than $3 million today in terms of purchasing power. So what once represented the elite now is simply the result of consistent saving and investing over the course of an entire lifetime. And much of this wealth isn't really visible. It's likely tied up in retirement accounts or home equity. And interestingly, even if someone had $3 million sitting in an account ready to deploy at any moment today, they still might feel more financially cautious than someone who had $1 million at the ready in 1985, because today's households tend to carry more of the financial responsibility themselves. Many more people have to support a greater portion of their retirement income from their portfolio because fewer households have a pension. Healthcare costs are greater today than they were in the past, and market volatility can feel personal. When your entire life savings is invested in the market and the market is volatile, these large swings can be hard to stomach. And the larger your portfolio is, the more painful these swings are. Watching a $10,000 portfolio drop by $1,000, that's mildly painful. But watching a $1 million portfolio drop by $100,000, that's an entirely different animal. And longevity is a greater risk as well. People are living longer, which means you very well may have a retirement that goes 30 years or more. In the past, maybe it felt like much of this risk was shared with a pension system from a previous employer, but now it feels like much of the risk is just sit squarely on your shoulders. Which brings us to one of the primary reasons this new class has emerged. There are actually several structural changes in the U.S. economy that have quietly created millions of households with seven-figure net worths. Over the past several decades, the U.S. retirement system shifted away from pensions and towards 401ks and individual retirement accounts. That shift has had a profound impact on how wealth shows up in people's lives. Because much of the wealth is tied up in retirement accounts, it's not showing up in visible lifestyle spending. A very common household today might look something like this: $1.2 million in a 401k, $300,000 in home equity, $150,000 in brokerage savings. That household has a $1.7 million net worth. And yet their entire life might look very middle class because the vast majority of their wealth is tied up in retirement accounts that are meant for the future. And realistically, this is how these accounts are supposed to function. When someone contributes to a 401k, they're not buying a more luxurious lifestyle. They're buying financial security. They're buying their future independence. Which means retirement accounts have quietly helped create millions of millionaires, even if those households don't necessarily look wealthy from the outside. Another major driver of this has been housing. In many parts of the country, homeowners who bought homes years ago and simply held onto them benefited from enormous appreciation of their property values. For example, a home purchased for $350,000 now worth, say, $850,000. That increase alone can create $500,000 of wealth without any lifestyle change. If you purchased a home 20 or 30 years ago and stayed put and captured that appreciation, that absolutely matters from a wealth standpoint. Your home is an incredibly valuable asset. Now, can you build wealth without owning a home? Yes, absolutely. But know that without owning a home, that burden heavily shifts to your own savings discipline. Because for many people, a home acts as a forced savings account. And if you don't have that money that you're setting aside paying towards this mortgage, building equity over time, know that you intentionally have to take money, put it into your savings, put it into your investment, and intentionally grow that on your own. So while homeownership certainly isn't the only path to wealth, for millions of families, it is one of the main drivers they have reached this seven-figure net worth status. Markets have also played a major role. Since the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, the United States has experienced one of the longest and strongest bull markets in history. Over time, steady contributions combined with strong market growth has turned households into millionaires. Since the 1990s, the number of millionaires in the US has tripled. And I think this is very important because culturally, we tend to have this very narrow story that we tell about wealth. We tend to think of those who are wealthy as those with the most prestigious jobs, the very elite job titles, or the one with the most visible career. But in reality, that is not the only nor the most common path to wealth. If you've been a diligent saver and investor, steadily contributing, staying invested, and letting time do its work, it is absolutely possible to build significant wealth through disciplined habits alone. And that is one of the biggest reasons this group has grown so much. Now, here's the interesting part. Now, even though these households may feel financially secure or even asset rich, they still feel middle class. And there's a number of reasons for that as well. Part of this is simply that the image of wealth has become incredibly distorted. For most of human history, your comparison group is pretty small. It was your neighbors, your coworkers, other people in your community. But now we have the entire world in our pocket through the internet. Instead of comparing ourselves to someone down the street, we're comparing ourselves to someone who lives 1,000 miles away in a mansion, buying a 6-figure car, flying private, vacationing on a yacht. And this has shifted how we think about rich, and it's changed how we think about wealth. I truly believe that social media has completely distorted our understanding of what it means to be doing well financially. And because of that, that's just one of the many reasons I'm an advocate for spending less time on social media. Yes, I make YouTube videos here, and I hope they're helpful, and I hope they are informative. But outside of that, I don't have Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or any of the other platforms. I think these platforms are bad for mental health, they're bad for your emotional well-being, and more importantly, they pull you away from actually living your life. So if I could add one piece of advice here, it would be to put your phone down and go outside, because wealth in real life looks way more ordinary than the version we see online. So let's take a closer look at these middle-class wealthy households, because even though many of them have 7-figure account balances, they still feel financially cautious. First, it's important to consider the spendability of this money. For many households, especially those who've accumulated wealth slowly over a 30 or 40-year career, much of their wealth is sitting parked inside a retirement account. And if you've spent entire decades saving and investing and slowly building this wealth, you don't reach a certain age, say 62, and step away from the workforce and suddenly tell yourself, hey, it's time to let loose. Your entire life has likely been built around the habit of saving and budgeting and being careful with money.